deep into that darkness peering. Long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting.
The Great War. The World War. War to end all wars. The only true name it has is the last war. For now, there remains not enough people to fight another. The war ended not with a bang, but a cough and a splutter. The disease that took hold spread far and wide. Few survived the fever and filth. With so few humans left, those that dwelled in the night took up the arms of man to fight over what was left. Those scattered beings hunt the trenches of the last war for scraps, salvage, and weapons. These are the end times. This is the last war. The Last War, or The Last War Forbidden Psalm, is a game system that has been around for quite some time. The Last War is a spin-off of Will Raham Daltrey's Forbidden Psalm game system. In a rather simplified way of describing the game system to you, I would describe it as a more in-your-hands version of Necromunda. This is the game for kitbashers. This is the game for headcanon. There really isn't a lot of lore when it comes to this game, but for the snippets that we do have, it is incredibly interesting. To put it bluntly, this game is essentially if Stalker took place during World War I.
Get out of here, Stalker.
Another thing that I do want to mention as well, before you type your little comments, this game predates Trench Crusade. Sorry, Sweaty. Now, in terms of actually getting into the game itself, the modern publication is from Wargames Atlantic. And in this video, I plan to give you a good look inside the entirety of the box. Now, for those of you that are subscribed and are familiar with the content, you'll know that I'm an affiliate of Wargames Atlantic, but I will be 100% truthful with you. This was my idea. I thought the game looked interesting, and I wanted to do a video on it. So, if you're still interested after I go through the game itself, go through the rules, go through the idea of the game, as well as the miniatures, and kitbash some of them, you can use my affiliate link down below to wargamesatlantic.com, and you can punch in my discount code MISHMASH5% to save 5% on your purchase. But enough of the promotional stuff, I think it's about time we actually talk about the game itself. Now, Last War Forbidden Psalm is a somber and gloomy experience. The base game is a 5-man skirmish. If you wish to get fully immersed, there is an entire table dedicated to rolling your characters. This being their names, their flaws, and their perks. The flaws range from anything between being weak-hearted, meaning during morale tests they just die if they fumble it, or they are just destined to always carry a turnip for some reason. Each squad also comes with one special trooper, and this is where things get really interesting. This can range from something as simplistic as a gunner with a larger weapon, to a literal fucking witch. That's a nice segue into the actual world itself. Magic is prevalent in this universe. And to accompany it, there is an ensemble of horrible beasties, mutants, and freaks that roam the trenches. Feral vampires, werewolves, horrible grubs and gas bugs, as well as giant rats. Most of which actually come with the base game. Speaking of which, I'm gonna stop yapping about the background of the game itself and finally show you the contents of the box. Inside, you'll get a bunch of little tokens for the game itself, as well as a nicely printed booklet. Inside is basically everything you need to know about the lore, as well as the rules, world building, character building, pretty much everything you could possibly need. You can also get the rules digitally, but I like to have a physical copy. You also get a nice multicolored set of dice. Always nice to have, I totally don't have a gigantic shoebox full of dice. You also get 36 25mm bases, which is super nice to have. You will have a shit ton of leftover bases for other characters, and that's exactly what I did. Now for the bits that really make the game special. These are the Weird War sprues. Essentially, these are an upgrade sprue of random giant rats, grubs, as well as interesting melons and designs to kitbash into interesting characters. You also get some additional weapons, nasty, awful flanging arms, and you can use these to make into any sort of creature that you want. Honestly, they're just great bits for kitbashing just about anything. You could use this for anything relating to Warhammer. Personally, my favorite bit in the sprue is the evil rat face. Now, in terms of the full-fledged figures you'll be using in the game itself, you'll be getting 4 sprues from each faction that is currently in the Wargames Atlantic World War I series. This being a sprue of 7 Russian soldiers, 6 German soldiers, 7 French soldiers, of which are my personal favorites of the set, just aesthetically. I wonder what the lore is on France. And finally, 5 British soldiers. Altogether, you got 25 playable miniatures, and like I said, you only need 5 to make a squad. And if you include the extra critters you get with the Weird War sprue, that comes to around 33 minis. Okay, so technically you only get like 3 extra bases, but hey, 3 extra bases! You can make some cool characters. And that's exactly what we're gonna do now. See, undoubtedly, one of the biggest draws of this game to me personally is the heavy incentivization to kitbash. Sure, you can use just regular World War I soldiers and it would still work, but this game is grimdark and it could use a little bit of flavor. Plus, Wargames Atlantic has a lot of different model kits that you could use to make some cool figures. But for the figures I'm making for today's video that I actually got finished, I decided to basically capture the box art. Well, I guess technically it's the graphic for the box, as there are no official miniatures outside of the conversions. Like I said, this game is your dudes pushed to the extreme. But for my first squad, I decided to utilize everything that came with the base kit. Hey, technically it's still a kit bash. I'm using several different fatigues to make my own unique figures. I did want to make a more coherent squad with this, as I'm using the French uniforms, and to designate the squad leader, I'm using the beaky helmets from the Weird War conversion kit. I felt using this would fit alongside the rest of them, as the main character on the box art has a British helmet clearly. So for the rest of the squad, each of them are getting British helms with gas masks. The best way I've found is hiding the tubes inside of the fatigues. I could snip it, and I could use just a little bit of sprue goo to kinda hide it. Some of the history buffs might not like that this is not historically accurate, but at the same time, there's literally demons and straight up vampires, so I don't care. The melee specialist I decided to make was actually kinda different. I decided to use a base British helmet, and I would put on this faceplate from the German kit. It gives a more lack of regard for his own safety, and it just looks cool. But that's another thing that I find interesting about this game that I haven't mentioned previously. Gear such as gas masks, extra filters, and even your weapons are actually something that you buy for your squad. The point system in this game is essentially tied to how much gear you can take with you, and I think that's something that's really cool for kinda long-term gameplay. Considering the game is essentially a skirmish game mixed with a tabletop RPG, I find it really interesting that the main theme of this game is that your guys are going to die. Not that there's necessarily a right or wrong way to play the game, but I still think it's really funny that I decided to go with a more coherent squad as opposed to making a bunch of random characters, which is what I'm actually focusing on now. But to get back more into the figures that we're making, to make these guys really stand out, I decided to use some of my grassland tufts as a means of creating some weird strawy, woolly effects. Considering the box art has kind of that straw tuft at the bottom, it just feels fitting. And it's something I've been wanting to do for a while. At first I kind of just stuck it on as it already has glue, but once I used the super glue it was pretty seamless. Especially having longer patches of actual grassland tufts, it really allows it to just kind of wrap around the figure and it was good to go. I swear, some of these actually felt like they were designed to wrap around a figure. Only issue I really ran into was trying to add them on after I glued a backpack. It wasn't going to work, so I had to remove it. The only other conversions I really did was simply removing some of the bags to give them bigger backpacks, but this was kind of sparse. I also gave some of the figures different weapon types from each sprue, as they are basically scavengers. The only drawback of having them be a coherent squad, however, was I wanted their sleeves to be similar, so a lot of the weapons were still French. But once I had everything built up, I actually did a really simplistic paint job, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. I essentially just zenithal primed and used some speed paints, which I'm really not used to doing, but it really does work for this type of art style. Doing a deeply contrasting slap chop, or whatever the hell you want to call it nowadays, really feels fitting to how gritty the setting is. You can paint them however you want to paint your dudes, but to me, I feel like it just needs a little bit more of a muted palette considering how bleak the situation is. If you're curious about the paints I used, it was just desolate brown and pallid bone. All the leathers were variations of snakebite leather and some black ink, and the helmets were a little bit of militarum green. Sure, I did add in some interesting shading and weathering methods to the helmets, to the metals, but the biggest thing that I wanted to do to make these guys stand out is I decided to number their helmets. I don't know, something about this setting reminds me of 9. I also tried my best to make the calligraphy different on each helmet to give each of them a little bit more personality. With that, now I have some pretty fitting models that actually replicate the box art pretty well. But I will say the main draw of this game is creating those crazy specialist characters, and I've been doing quite a bit of that. In fact, this video is actually delayed quite a bit because I couldn't stop building them. Seriously, every time I looked at the specialist page, I'd get a new idea for a new figure, and I'm knees deep in them. I have so many models right now. But that's where it comes back to you. I really want to make more content on this wargame. So if you're interested in more, please give a like, comment, and subscribe. It will help so much more because I really want to do more of this stuff. Hell, tell me how it's a Trench Crusade ripoff. Any little bit helps. But with that, I've definitely been flapping my beak enough for one video. So like always, remember to mishmash, kitbash, and paint some fantastic miniatures. And you're gonna. I promise. See ya.